A federal appeal court ruled that President Donald Trump's travel ban will remain blocked, at least for now. The unanimous ruling comes from a 3-judge panel. Now, despite Trump's executive order last month, citizens from those 7 majority Muslim countries will be able to travel to the United States. Trump's response? See you in court. Here to weigh in on the ruling is a former clerk to Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Anna Rose Mathieson. She's now partner at California Appellate Law Group. Anna Rose, how did they arrive at this decision, and what does this mean?
Well, what it means is, for now, the ban will continue to not be enforced. That is, people can continue to come into the country from those 7 nations without having the executive order applied. But it's not by any means a final decision on whether or not the executive order is appropriate.
And how did they arrive at that decision?
So they arrived at it very quickly. A normal Ninth Circuit case takes about 2 years, and they did this in very short order, got expedited briefing from the parties, then had a oral argument over the telephone, which is also quite unusual, and quickly put out a very thorough 29-page opinion.
Government lawyers argued to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals that the ban was a lawful exercise of the president's authority. Do they have a point?
No, the court rejected that argument quite clearly. So even though the president does have broad powers over immigration, the president can't use those powers in an unconstitutional manner. And even though Trump had argued the court should simply defer to him and not even look at the constitutional issues here, the court said no. For hundreds of years, it's been the job of judges in this country to say whether or not people's rights are being violated.
And how did they arrive at that decision? How is it unconstitutional in their opinion?
So what the court ended up saying is that it violates the due process rights. So usually you have rights to have notice and a hearing before any of your liberties are taken away. And the court said this applies not only to citizens, but to permanent residents who are covered by this ban, by relatives of people who might be U.S. citizens, and by issuing this blanket order and not giving all the people from these affected countries a full process, notice, a hearing, some sort of individual determination, the executive order violated their due process rights.
So what about those who are not U.S. citizens?
Well, so the court said there are still some due process interests, certainly for permanent residents. Even for people who live here potentially illegally, there's some level of due process rights. And even for people who have never been in the country before, there might still be due process rights of U.S. citizens who care about those. So have, say, a family member from one of those countries. Even though the family member might not have their own individual due process rights, the U.S. citizens could assert their rights to be with their family members.
So essentially, could this apply to the entire planet?
Well, it could. I think a potential travel ban on anyone from every country would certainly have some of the same infirmities. It wouldn't have the potential questions about religious discrimination that the panel also discussed but didn't end up deciding on. But yeah, it could apply to people from any country who want to come into the United States.
And as far as those due process rights, could pretty much anybody have those rights then, it sounds like?
Well, anyone who, so they certainly didn't say everyone has these rights, but they say that the ban itself violates enough of these rights that it can't be enforced until we have a full time for careful consideration on the issue. So they certainly didn't say every single person from those countries has these rights, but there's a large number of people who do have these due process rights that are being violated by this ban.
So what's next? What direction will this head moving forward? Do you think it'll be rewritten? Some people think that perhaps Trump will take some of these concerns, rewrite it, and do it that way. What do you think?
Yeah, he certainly could, and I think there have been reports that they may be working on that. The administration seems to maintain they're still going to take it to court and try to go all the way, which suggests they're potentially going to the U.S. Supreme Court next. They have options. They could try to seek rehearing from more judges on the Ninth Circuit, which is called en banc, when it's not just 3 Ninth Circuit judges, but 11 or potentially the whole court. They probably won't do that because it'll take longer and they're not that likely to get a favorable decision, but they could very well go to the United States Supreme Court and ask for an emergency stay of the trial court's ruling blocking the ban.
So if it does head to the Supreme Court, will Neil Gorsuch be involved in that decision?
Very likely not. It will take a while before he is, at least at the initial stage. So it will take quite a while before he is confirmed. These sorts of emergency stays applications move very quickly. The justices are certainly alert. They know that something is potentially coming. Each chamber has probably had a clerk already assigned to this issue to essentially be ready at the drop of a hat. And it's not at all uncommon for, in kind of emergency situations, for clerks to pull all-nighter, for them to be calling their justices in the middle of the night to try to get potential rulings. So I would suspect that it would move, this particular stage would move quickly enough that he will not be confirmed and be on the court by the time it gets there. If a later stage might end up coming to the court after he has been confirmed, if he's confirmed.
Trump called out one judge after he blocked his executive order, calling him a so-called judge on Twitter. Supreme Court nominee Neil Gorsuch reportedly told a senator that Trump's tweets about the judiciary are demoralizing and disheartening. What do you make of that?
It's very unusual. I'd say it's absurd and unprecedented, but it seems like almost everything from this administration has had, there's been some level of that, so we can't keep saying that. It's quite unusual to have a situation where a nominee ends up taking a position. And so Neil Gorsuch has been actually very careful to say he is not saying Trump's policies, Trump specifically was doing something demeaning and demoralizing. He simply says saying negative things about a judge could be demeaning and demoralizing. Okay. But given that Trump's comments are clearly negative and attacks on judges, it's relatively easy to put those two together. So I think the administration tried to do the particularly unique thing is the administration tried to do some backpedaling after these comments came out. And then there was another statement from the nominee saying he did say these not in reference to Trump in particular, but in reference to attacks on the judiciary.
Right, and now the media and the judiciary now have something in common, you could say.
Exactly. It's a lot of people are under attack.
Could Trump's treatment toward judges affect the outcome of this case or any others?
It could, to some degree. I think judges certainly have great respect for the other branches of government, but don't like the fact that people are essentially undermining and doubting their authority and calling them into question for trying to do their jobs. So it certainly isn't going to do Trump any favors, but I don't think anyone is going to in any way take that as any sort of direct, have any sort of direct effect in this. It doesn't help him, but it's not going to have any significant role.
All right, well, the battle is far from over. The Trump administration may take this all the way to the Supreme Court, as we mentioned. Anna Rose Mathieson, thank you so much for joining us out of California.
Thanks very much.